Hello everybody, welcome back to Making Records with Eric Valentine. I'm going to do another round of responding to comments and questions that have come in on the last couple of episodes. So these will be from the last comments and questions episode. There was more questions that got asked there. And then the Nickel Creek one. So I grabbed a bunch of stuff out of those two, and then we can just keep the conversation going. So I'm going to just dive in here and see what we got. Okay, so we've got, and I got to apologize, I'm trying to, it's a little hard for me to tell when I cut and paste this stuff if the name, what name relates to what question. Hopefully I'm getting this right. So I think this is Soulflower. Maybe you already mentioned it before in a long episode, but if not, can you introduce and talk a bit about your electronic engineer collaborator, Larry? I would love to do that. I've been planning on having an episode with him for a long time, ever since I started the YouTube channel, because he is just an absolute gem. He is so incredible. Just an inconceivable wealth of knowledge about audio electronics, obviously, and then kind of everything. Like, he's one of those people. Everything he takes in, all the information he takes in, he just retains. And he's just a really wonderful person. So it would be really fun to do. I think it would be really fun to just do a Ask Larry episode where people can just, maybe we'll even do it live. Or I could do it like this, and put up an episode, hey, put a bunch of questions in, and, and then Larry and I can get up and I'll try and help moderate it. I mean, that guy, if you ask a question about some sort of audio thing, anything, he will talk forever. So we may have to manage that a little bit. But I think it would be super fun. It's extremely informative. The only other thing that is challenging is that, he talks about audio electronics at a level that I definitely don't understand. So he gets way deep down into all of the nitty-gritty math and theoretical stuff when choosing components and how they all interact together and all of that stuff. And so some of the references and some of what he talks about is a little hard to hold on to, or is not as meaningful if you don't really understand this stuff at the same level that he does. So I might be able to help translate some of it as well, because I've already heard it all and asked the questions of like, okay, so what does that actually mean? When he goes into all this crazy stuff, but it'd be super fun to do. He's just wonderful. Okay, so there's a few people that asked this about giving a tour of this new place when it's done. I think probably the best thing is I'm definitely going to, take a swing at doing this like retreat masterclass type thing. That's probably the best way to do it. Maybe there's a way to have people come and tour the place. We'll see if that would be manageable or not. It really just depends how much it's being used and what's going on and all that stuff. But I'm open to it if it works, Okay, hi, thanks for the video. I'm curious about what computer you use for your production work. Do you use off-the-shelf Mac? I do. Do you aim for a certain amount of RAM or any other specification? I I haven't been super picky about computers in the past, because I still do so much of the really important stuff that, or things that I think are important, happen outside of the computer. And, the computer is really mostly a place to just gather everything. I do use plugins, but definitely not to the degree that I think a lot of other people do. And so I've never felt like I've needed to have like a super duper duper, maxed out computer in order to do my sessions. They've always worked fine. I'm still working on a, 2013 trash can Mac. So that's what was used. I actually brought that computer with me to Nashville. I've been using it since I got it in 2013. So whatever all stuff I've done since then in the last 10 years was definitely done on this Mac. I actually bought two of them at the time, because there were two studios at Barefoot. So I had identical systems in the two rooms there. And so this one is, late 2013. The processor is 3.5 gigahertz, 6-core Intel, memory 32 gigabytes. It's got just a conventional, hard disk in there. It's not even a solid-state drive in there. Graphics card is, 2 gigabyte graphics card. So it's really not anything that special, because I don't lean on the computer processing as much as I think other people do. So that's what it is. I actually just ordered a Mac for the new place, and so I'm going to do a studio Mac. I have an expansion chassis so I can do Pro Tools HD. I think I'm going to need that to have as much I/O as I'm envisioning for it. And so this time around, I did go a little more on the maxed out side. I didn't get the totally maxed out one, but I think they have like a sort of like there's conventional one, and then they have more like a pro one, and I did that sort of like the the starter of the pro one. Sorry, I don't remember all the details right now, but I think it has a 1 terabyte internal drive. Actually, I may have increased that so I can just have it mirror my Dropbox. But so yeah, so that's what I'm going to do in the new place. And at some point when I get into this again, I have that thing set up, and I can just pull up the the specs of it. I'll do that and share it with you. It'll definitely be more robust than what I'm using now. Okay. Let's see. Do you have any experience recording a band digitally for editing and comping purposes, and then dumping the final performance to tape before mixing? I've done it that way for sure. I've tried it a couple of ways. At one point, I was like, I'm going to record everything on tape first and then transfer on the computer. It didn't really make sense. Just used up a lot of tape, sort of the wrong direction, and then do it in the computer first, and then transfer to tape at the end. I did that. And then now what I'm doing is doing them concurrently. So in that Nickel Creek episode, you can see the setup where, and it's even sort of an extreme version of it, where there's these raw, completely unprocessed mic preamp signals that get captured into the computer, and then I actually send them out of the computer, and they go through a bunch of outboard processing and a tape machine, and then come back in. And it all happens, well, actually that's not true. So it really is what you're saying here, because for a while I was doing it all at the same time, and then it was just a waste of hard drive space, because the thing that ultimately really matters is, once you have a comp, I need like the edited, the like processed version of just that. I don't need processed version of everything. And I was starting to run into problems also where if I was capturing analog at the same time, it was the same issue I had always had with that, where I do an initial pass, there's something there that I like it, I can't change anything after that. So I can't keep working on the sounds. But if I'm capturing just the mic preamps into the computer, I'm monitoring through my analog chains, so I'm hearing that, and while they're doing passes and getting takes, I'm just kind of, making little adjustments here and there, and just sort of doing little refinements along the way. And in theory, by the time the arrangement is great, we have performances that we love, and we know that we've nailed all the sections and stuff, I've done tweaking, it all sort of converges at the end and should work. And then I can, even after I get the comp, I can do some final tweaks on the settings then, where I can really just focus on that. So yeah, so I am essentially doing what you suggested there. I love that workflow, the way it's sort of refined now. Okay, so then this is Marius H, I think. I don't know. I got to just stop with the names because I don't know if they're right. Okay. How are you liking the big Strausses compared to the small ones? Have you completely stopped using the NF3s? I'm definitely going to just use the big Strausses in the new control room. There may be an editing room where I'll still have the small ones. And the thing that's cool is that I find that they do translate from one to the other. Jürgen definitely is very tuned into hearing. There's a thing that he wants to hear out of the speakers, and it's very consistent through his stuff, because he has, the big ones, the MF 2.1s, the NF3s, which are the smaller ones. He had a previous mid-size one, and he recently came out with a newer version of the mid-size, which is the MF4, because the other mid-size one was, I felt, not as musical as the NF3s and the MF 2.1s, the big ones. The one in the middle didn't hit me the same way. And then now he has the MF4s, and those are every bit as good as the others, and they really feel very consistent. Obviously, the NF3s, you know, they start to give out at around 50 hertz. They'll start to roll off after 50 hertz. If you see them, like, it's understandable. It's a pretty small driver, and there's only so much you can do there. And those ones really force me to monitor quieter. You know, like if you have a lot of low end going, they'll just start to, you know, make all these kind of stop crushing me sounds from the kick drum or whatever, you know. So, you know, it forces me to mix a little quieter. And I do still really like the experience of having the sound really immediate like that. So far, the big ones, even when they're a good 6-7 feet away, they feel like they're just right in your face, man. They're pretty incredible that way. I was a little bit nervous about that when I first, you know, set them up and wanted to see, like, is this still going to feel like I've got this stuff like right there where I can just touch it, you know, right in front of me, and they definitely feel like that, even with a little more distance between you and the speaker. So. So yeah, I think they're both still great. They translate to each other really well, and I'm gonna, you know, have the small ones in a editing and mixing room. Okay, a few questions about this. Yeah, about Atmos, and so my plan was definitely to not do Atmos in this new control room. As the weeks and months progress, I'm feeling the crushing weight of having to address Atmos coming down on me. It seems like it's really going there. You know, I've been through this before with surround. Everybody's like, everything's going surround, man. You gotta have surround. And I set up a surround control room, and then nobody cared about surround. So, but you know, I get it. Atmos is different. It's self-configuring. We recently just got a new Sonos speaker that is doing some sort of immersive experience out of just one thing that's about this big, you know, and it's interesting. It does something, you know. It kind of feels like stuff is coming around a little bit. I don't know. It doesn't sound like it's coming from behind you, but it may wrap around a little bit. But yeah, I'm starting to hear that you know, some of these you know, music services like Apple Music, Spotify are saying that, you know, unless you deliver in Atmos, they're not going to include you. So that's really going to force the issue. So yeah, I'm going to probably have to do Atmos versions of the Nickel Creek record that doesn't exist yet. And so right now, what I'm going to have to do is do stems through the RCA console because I don't have enough channels to really capture that sound in Atmos. So I don't know. I gotta figure it out. But yeah, I think I'm gonna have to go Atmos. You know, I don't know. Maybe it's cool. I'm not sure. So far, I've heard a couple things, but they're all kind of like, you know, kind of like vintage classic music stuff. You know, like Elton John's Rocket Man and stuff. And it's like, I don't know. I don't really need to hear the guitar behind me on that one. It seems pretty great in stereo. So, but I'm sure it'll be great. You know, maybe just have more room to fit things in, I guess. Okay, onward. Okay. Okay. I'm wondering if you ever get to play drums just for fun, and if you do, what would be a go-to record to play along with? Okay, I love this question. I don't get to play drums a lot these days. I would like to do more. That's going to be part of getting, you know, this new place set up. As I've mentioned, I'm going to record a collection of my own music there, and so I'll be playing more. It's going to take a second to get the cobwebs out of whatever parts of me used to play instruments. So yeah, I'll be over there just like fucking around, having a good time, playing drums to stuff. And definitely the first thing for me will always be Led Zeppelin. That's my go-to, especially for drums. He still just blows me away. There's a momentum in Bonham's playing that has just never been captured by any other human being on this planet. And so I love that, and then I love playing to old like soul music, stuff like that. I mean, like Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, Al Green, stuff like that. I love playing that stuff. Aretha Franklin. You know, there was an era in my life. I think I mentioned in a previous thing where I was going down this sort of jazz fusion road, and I've sort of moved on from that. It's a lot of work. You know, the people who have really achieved the very high levels of that type of playing, you got to invest a lot of time. And I know I don't have that kind of time to try and get back those kind of chops. And so at this point, I just want to have fun playing something that feels great, you know. So yeah, I'll definitely be doing that. Okay, love to hear your top 10 of recordings that you seek out that you feel are extraordinary. Okay, here, we'll do this right now. I'm just going to pull up. I have a Spotify playlist called Reference. And so let me just pull this up. It can take a second. I think I've showed this thing before, but what the hell, I'll show you know, I can show it again. Okay, so here it is. You can check it out. Show Me How to Live, one of the best rock mixes of all time. Love that mix. Rich Costi crushed that. You Know How It Feels, just an amazing recording. It's a very bright mix, but in a wonderful way. So if I'm doing something really bright, that's kind of a good reference for me. No Quarter, one of my favorite Led Zeppelin, you know, recordings of all time. That one, it's a little drier, and I think it benefits from that. It's just, man, it's so punchy and cool. Obviously, When the Levee Breaks, always great. This Gorillaz track, beautiful, punchy low end. Here's a couple of my things. For the more like modern low end signature, you know, Chad Blake crushing it with the Black Keys stuff. This is just kind of cool to check out, like every time you think, oh man, I got a lot of low end going on, put one of these on. You'll see like, wait a minute, mine sounds like it's coming over a telephone, you know. I don't know. I don't know how he does it. He's so good. So yeah, check those out. Army of Me, I really like. Really love that mix. It's aggressive. You know, Hyper Ballad is a really cool low frequency test of speakers to see how even your low end is, because there's this like just like sine wave bass that plays through a bunch of notes. Muse stuff. That one is interesting because the mix, again, Costi, I think these mixes are the best example I've ever heard of something that sounds unbelievable on the radio. And then when I listen to it on my speakers in a studio that have no hype on them at all, they do sound a little bit just kind of flat. I mean, there's no hype in them at all. But the way it translates on the radio was just stunning. It was so incredible. Every time I come on the radio, it's just like, that is just how things should sound on the radio, you know. Some obvious choices here, Radiohead, yeah, National Anthem, Karma Police, Arabella, that's more Chad Blake, doing amazing low-end stuff. Aslan, that's a very little-known record that I worked on at one point. It's a very sparse recording, super simple, just has a really nice sort of natural, punchy drum sound in it. Beck Morning Phase record, the song Morning, beautiful. Paper Tiger, Say Goodbye is another good one from there. Capsized, I believe this is another Chad Blake, I believe, yeah, I think. Another Black Keys thing I threw in there. A couple more of my things. This is a couple of my favorites off of Grace's last record. Sean Everett, there he is. Alabama Shakes, amazing. And then more recently, you know, like all the stuff, this is more kind of like rock contemporary stuff. But I've been really getting into this era of recording. These like late 50s, early 60s, this one may be more like mid to late 60s recordings where it's just, you know, full orchestra in a room, and they are just unbelievable sounding. Man, you put that stuff on, you know, a beautiful sounding speakers, and it's just breathtaking. I think in a way that a lot of this modern stuff has sort of just forgotten about. So yeah, I've just been really enjoying a bunch of that stuff. There's all this like Les Baxter stuff, Martin Denny. You know, this Nat King Cole track was arranged by Nelson Riddle. Nelson Riddle did arrangements for why can't I think? Frank Sinatra. How do you forget that name? um, and yeah, they're just amazing recordings, you know. And that is like, it's a version of engineering and a specific version of the recording art form that is a little bit lost in some ways today. Yeah, it's incredible. Just love it. So there you go. There's that is my reference playlist. Okay, so okay, when you and Mama, that would be Grace, are working on something for her, do you have a mutual understanding of I'm the producer, you're the artist, or happy wife, happy life, which you two don't strike me as that type of couple? Or do you let her do her thing and you just kind of decorate as you go? Or is it a totally different dynamic in which she may use a different producer engineer altogether? Man, really good question. That can be a difficult relationship to navigate. And you know, obviously we met making a record together, and then ended up getting together outside of a creative relationship. And I feel like we are still able to sort of shift gears and go back into the producer-artist relationship. And you know, and I do get in there and guide things, and I'm actually learning. You know, we've done 2 records together that are released, and we have done more work together, and since those 2, and I feel like with every round I'm finding better where my place is, like how to get the absolute best out of Grace, and more recently. I am, in every way, I'm trying to insulate her more and more from the influences of anything. You know, me, record company, A&R people, radio formats, fuck all that. And I'm starting to really recognize more and more that just when you look at the history of her career, how she's trying to navigate that, and just the more time I've spent around her and seen just the just constant deluge of amazing creativity that comes out of her in every direction, like artwork, painting. Yesterday she was just drawing with colored markers. Just that's what she wanted to do that day. And it was beautiful. It was amazing, beautiful drawings. And it just never stops. Like, it's an endless, just, you know, supply of incredible artistic stuff, especially in the realm of music. The way music flows out of her is so effortless and so incredible. And it is at times very chaotic. Like, there's a lot of ideas going in a lot of different directions. She moves very fast, and so well, actually, probably the chaotic part is more just that she engages in a lot of different creative things, like pottery, drawing, painting, filmmaking, music, like on and on and on. And so. But when she does music, it's more concise, and so, you know, earlier on, you know, certainly on the first record, I really kind of showed up more with this, like, I'm gonna do my thing. It's gonna be so great for her and whatever, you know, and in hindsight, we made a really cool record that I'm proud of, but I don't know that was the best thing to do for her. It was I don't know if I really had a chance to discuss all the circumstances surrounding that, but it was kind of the only way that we could get a record done, or even start on working on a record. Just the nature of the relationship between her and the record company and her band, it was very complicated. But now, you know, like, we're in a situation where just just by the nature of her career and who she is, we've sort of cultivated a situation where she doesn't really have to fucking answer to anybody. And it is incredible, like the stuff that comes out of her. You know, she is a real artist. I think there's a real distinction there between people that want to play music for the purpose of getting recognition and, you know, making money or whatever. And then there are people that make music because they are true artists and create music in a realm that is really unaffected by other things. And she's really capable of that, and in such a beautiful way. And I think it's really been lost in the music industry grinder a certain amount. And so I am now really making an effort, you know, to allow her to do that and have her create things that are very, very true to her musical instincts. And I still try and help corral things into a place that, you know, distills down what I think is really important and emotionally important about the musical statement that she's making. But her instincts are so good, and you know, we have a good relationship with that. We can push back and forth with that. We've just done it so much, you know, and so I definitely have, you know, a card that I can play where I can just go like, this. I think this is a mistake. We got to try something else, you know, and she has the same thing, you know, like I'll push and push and push on something, and at a certain point, if she just says, this just doesn't feel right to me, like, fuck it, you know, like, it's got to feel right to her ultimately, because it can, you know, it's something she is trying to say, you know, to the world, and so I don't want to dilute or alter that at a certain point. And most of the time, we can get to a place where we have something that both of us really like, and you know, and I always try and use my I think I saw a bunch of questions that this relates to, and so I'm going to be repeating it a lot. But whenever I address stuff like this, if there's something that I think is not working, I never start out by saying, this is not working. It's the worst way to do that. And so I always start by going, hey, I think there's something really cool we could do here. And it keeps everybody excited about moving forward and trying something new that would be, you know, let's not talk about the thing that may not be so awesome. Let's talk about what it could be. And that's the best way to lead people down a path, if there's really something you feel like, you know, is getting missed in there. But yeah, good question. That can be tricky. So far, we're surviving it. There may be a point where it may be important for her to work with somebody else. You know, we've made 2 records, and you know, I think there'll be a third, and so, you know, just to change things up for her, it might be great to do that. And I'm happy to have her do whatever she feels will be the most inspiring, and, you know, make the best art for her. So I'll support her whatever direction she wants to run. Okay, so just to be clear. Okay, yeah, there's a question about the GB trackers. So you can use the satellite as a reamp box straight from your interface, right? In a perfect world, I would love... Blah, blah, blah. Okay, that is correct. So the satellite, it's just like any other reamp box. It's totally passive, no active, so you don't have to plug it in. It makes it really easy just to put it wherever you want. And you can have line level signal coming out of your interface. Go to that thing. It has a volume adjustment with detented controls, so they're recallable, and then the signal goes into your amp. So yeah, so you can buy just the satellite, and it'll works, and it is an excellent sounding reamp. It's based on a design that Larry did early on. He used a particular Neve transformer, a Neve line input transformer that was just well suited for the impedances that need to be addressed in a reamp. And so there's somebody we knew that had some laying around, and so we built up some reamps, by far the best ones. And so this is basically that same exact design with a transformer that we ultimately optimized even more, for what we're doing. So yeah, answer your question, satellite. You're good to go. Okay, questions. This is next one. So Scoops Dardaris, I think. Okay, seem like easygoing, personable, articulate, and you also seem to be someone who has high standard requirements. Okay, when working with artists, perhaps someone who may not strive for the same level. Okay, yeah, so this is that exact same thing. And I'm going to say it again because it is the most important thing when you're collaborating with people, especially in something that is as subjective as creating art, like music. I'm going to say it again. Never start the conversation about, so strive the same. Okay, perhaps with someone that may not strive for that same level of quality, how do you navigate those situations, communicate your personal expectation, and manage their expectations as well? So if there's somebody that is aiming low, I would never ever start by saying, hey man, we got to aim higher. This is just not good enough. Always start by saying, wow, I think there's something we could do here that would be really cool, or there might be a missed opportunity. Let's try this. This could be really great. It makes all the difference. It's just kind of everything. The psychology of that is so important. Every time there's a question that comes up that basically asks that same thing, I'm going to repeat it again because it is the magic cure for that stuff. Always phrase things in a positive light of what they could be, not what they aren't. Let's move on from that. Nobody wants to hear that. And ultimately, sort of beyond that, then there's really me trying to tune into the aesthetic of that particular artist. Perfection takes many different forms, and so I really have to know what perfect is for that person. And perfect for that person, that particular artist, could be having things a little bit out of tune and little things out of time and sounding more human and having imperfections in there that convey a sense of honesty, and so those things are extremely important to be tuned into. I at the beginning of the process, working with a new artist, I always, go into a lot of music listening, talking a lot about what they like, what they don't like, and really try and avoid those pitfalls. So when we start and we're in that control room together, and those moments come up, should we do this or should we do that? I have a clear sense of where this artist is really heading, because it's very different from one to the other, and so I think that's a really important part of it. Really educating myself about who this artist really is, and so I can show up with stuff that's like, and it might even be going the other direction. Like, man, we should make this rougher and raw and more out of tune. It'll be cooler that way, instead of trying to make things more perfect. Perfect is a moving target. There's a lot of different. It's very subjective. A lot of different, feelings about what that is. But it's a good question. Okay. Okay. This is a fun one. You said the cold doesn't bother you much. Have you ever experimented with cold plunges or cold showers a la Wim Hof? Curious to hear about your experiences. Yeah, I looked into this. He's an extraordinary human being. There's at a certain point, the more I sort of watch it, it feels like might be just a hint of the guru complex going on there. Maybe, I don't know. I haven't met him myself, but it feels like it's maybe transitioning into that. But I think there is some really great information there, and I appreciate that he actually backs it up with some real clinical trials on himself and other people, instead of just saying subjectively, I did this and it made me feel that. That's testimonials, worst source of information ever, and so I generally don't pay attention to testimonials. But he's been able to quantify it, and it seems pretty cool. I did his breathing exercises for a period of time when we were in the midst of the pandemic, and I did it for a while. It was a little intense for me. I'm sure there are benefits for it, but at a certain point I was like, man, I don't know if I can do this every day. Every day, that's this very intense experience. Just being like lightheaded and kind of dizzy and feeling super high, And ultimately, I didn't feel like it made a huge difference in the rest of the day for me. But the cold plunge thing is also pretty cool. We have here in Vermont a little like river. It's like a little brook that runs just right behind our house, and we have an amazing little swimming hole behind our house. And early in the spring and early summer, that water is fucking cold. It is no joke cold. And so I have done it. You just gotta you can't tiptoe your way in there. You just gotta go in. And it is pretty incredible how you feel after that. That one, subjectively for me, it's very invigorating. So I played with it. I don't do it all the time. It's not like a matter of common practice for me, but I think it's cool stuff. Okay, so now we've got Chevapo, I think. Great advice. It would be great to talk a bit, preferably 10+ hour video about how you usually tackle pre-production of songs with bands. So I just talked about that a little bit. How to get musicians in a headspace that this thing matters a lot and you should spend some time on it and stuff like that. It's one of the biggest challenges for me, technically, psychologically. Yeah. So again, always framing thing in a positive context that you're moving forward, reaching for something new, exciting, something that could make things cooler, better, whatever. That just gonna keep repeating it. But yeah, I probably will do an episode that goes deeper into sort of like the psychology of record making, and just get into all of that stuff, just working with singers, working with bands, going through the pre-production process, different approaches that I've had for that. It's really, really important, just establishing that trust and rapport with the band. So when those moments come up, and you want to try and push them into an area that may not be right in their comfort zone, they'll trust you to do it, So yeah, we'll definitely do that at some point. Okay. And then we've got, I'm really looking forward to a question. When I want to focus on low end. Okay, yeah, so this person is saying, when I want to focus in on low end, I've been putting a low shelf, 60 dB of gain at 150 hertz, wow, and then turning down the output of that EQ by the same amount, boosting speakers. Are there any drawbacks to the approach I'm thinking of? Thanks for taking so much time. It feels a little weird to me. In a perfect world, you'd have speakers that are giving you all the information that you need all the time, and you're just working sort of, on a straight path to completion. I think that's ideal, but maybe that's just not available with the monitoring that you have. And so at the end of the day, if this is working for you and you're getting the results that you want, then great. Then I would say keep doing it. And I mean, in some ways, it might be akin to having multiple sets of monitors in front of you. You can switch to different monitors to hear a different perspective. I would highly, highly recommend just doing a quick, graph of the frequency response of your room. I do that in every space I ever set up for working on music. This goofy bedroom setup, the basement setup, my lab control room in Topanga, in Barefoot. I spent years tinkering around with it. This new space, I'm graphing it over and over and over again and making tweaks. So I really know what I'm getting from the speakers. And you could, if you graph it, if you haven't done that with this EQ move that you're doing, then you can actually see where the deficits are in the low end and do an EQ that actually makes it a little flatter, because my guess is that if you're boosting at 150, you may be adding a whole bunch of stuff. Well, I don't know. With your room, it could be, anything could be going on in there, but typically most speakers are going to be able to reach down lower than 150, and you may want to just boost in the range where it's really dropping off. So I don't know. There may be some things to try, but if it's working, if it sounds great when you play it on other things, then it's working. So that's all that matters. If it sounds good, then you're doing it right. Okay. Okay, so then somebody asked, do you still have the J37? I didn't see it amongst all the gear. I definitely still have the J37. I think I talked about it in an episode recently. Love that tape machine. It'll definitely, that is a permanent part of my universe. This is getting into the Nickel Creek episode now. Okay. Here's thanks for sharing. Okay, one of my favorite things about your mixes is the mid-range presence on your kicks, not clicky, nice and splayed out. I know tape, Fabulous Saturn, common tools for that. Yeah, so definitely. I mean, you sort of answered your own question there. If there, I have a drum mixing episode, and I specifically show how I use FabFilter Saturn for this exact thing. So you can really, see at least how I approach it using that plugin. And then tape machines, man, they're magical for this. I really experienced it again on this Nickel Creek project, because there's a bunch of stuff where we're sort of simulating kick drums by Mike Elizondo thumping on his bass, or there's one where Chris is stomping on a big wooden, riser kind of thing. And so we did a fair amount of that, and man, you put it through a tape machine and you just push it just right to that right place, and you just feel that all of that sort of harsh, clicky, disembodied, weird stuff just get smoothed into this one continuous sound. So, I think you really sort of answered the question there. Okay, let's see. With how heavy-handed your mixing style is, I wonder, do you generally work towards a finished sound that's in your head, or experiment until it feels right? Your videos obviously show finished mix sessions, so I'm curious if it's much of a linear process for you, or if often backtrack when something doesn't work. Yeah, there's certainly times where it goes terribly awry. You'll get to the end of that process, and then put it in my car or start A/Bing to things, and just be like, well, that didn't work. Just start over. You can tell it just didn't get stacked up right, and the whole thing is just struggling to really sound good. And I find for me that the process is way more linear if I continually check in with a reference. And so, I try to find a good reference at the beginning of the mix process, whether it's another song from the same project, or something that's by a whole other artist that I really love the sound of, that I think relates to what I'm trying to do. I just keep checking in with that to make sure that I'm just staying on target, and don't start turning the monitors up too loud and stray off course and get to the end with a really dark, muddy sounding mix. That only sounds good if you turn your speakers all the way up. That's probably the mistake I make the most. But yeah, it stays pretty linear if I keep on checking my references, Okay. How did you get the upright bass to thump in the song Strangers? I know you used compression, but is that all? Does it just thump on its own, and all you have to do is turn up the fader? So there is a kind of a cool discovery on this project with upright bass. And in general, I'll probably have a chance to talk about this more if I get a chance to chat with Nickel Creek or do a deconstruction. But to summarize, basically, on this record, we wanted to go more in the surreal direction. So I had license to try more experimental stuff with the treatment of their instruments. They didn't want it to just be like bluegrass in a room, which they're great at. It's an amazing version of what they do, because it really highlights how extraordinary they are at musicians. Just get out of the way and let them play. But that's not what they wanted for this. They wanted, we'll play great and we'll do our thing, but let's even try and elevate it more. And so my thing, whenever that's happening, is, to whatever qualities are there that are sort of delivered or, included in the intention of what's being played, whatever qualities that you get, let's take those qualities even further. If it's something kind of dreamy and ethereal, let's make it super dreamy and ethereal. You know, if it's something that needs to be kind of punchy, let's make it super punchy. So everything just has more of these extremes, you know, so you're moving from more dramatic places, and the whole record isn't just this kind of like flat, you know, thing. And so what I ended up doing with the bass on this, and I did this with all of the instruments on this record, I forced all of them to have pickups on their instruments, and I recorded direct digital DIs for everything: bass, mandolin, fiddle, and guitar, all of them. And so after we got all of the performances and everything was all done, I came back here, and actually, I apologize, the bass part was done in Nashville. I had that, I figured out a setup for that and was able to do it as we went, because I found a combination that was really good. And so, you know, I had mics on the bass. There was, you know, the main sort of gist of the sound was a C12A down lower to get the real subby stuff, and then I had, oh yeah, 47 FET on an upper lobe, kind of more mid-rangey attack kind of thing. And then later I added a couple just kind of like overhead mics for the bass so I could widen it out when he was doing arco stuff or whatever more, you know, airy kind of stuff. And then I was also capturing the DI. And so I experimented a bunch, you know, Dave Cobb's place, he's got an amazing collection of amps. And so I took the bass DI, tried it through a bunch of different amps there, a B15, blah, 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 all this cool bass amps. And the one that was totally magical was this reissue Magnetone, a 212 reissue Magnetone amp. There was something so punchy about that amp. It just had all of the fingered thwack in it, you know? And so I ended up printing that on everything. And you have to play with the phasing a bunch. And so I would slide things around in Pro Tools, and I came up with a formula like, this is where the 47 FET is, this is where the C12A is, this is where the amp thing is, you know, so the phasing all lands in a satisfying way. And just there was, when it all kind of fell into place, all of a sudden there was just this amazing, you know, kind of superhuman thumpy bass thing that was happening. I was very, very excited about that because it was something new. I just never done it before, and everybody was really enjoying it. So, so that's where that came from. The snaps in holding pattern, I predict you boosted 2.83K because the way it sounds, it's as if one person doing the snaps. But to cut through, you really had, yeah, you're exactly right. There's a bunch of really aggressive high mids in there. And of course, like printed through a tape machine. I don't think I compressed it. It actually made it, I seem to remember that the compression made it sound smaller. But hitting it really hard, finding that sweet spot going through that MCI tape machine where it was just, you know, gluing everything together in the sound, and you get that sort of, you know, apparent energy in the sound. So even when it's not super loud, it sounds just like this really dense, exciting sound. And that was one person snapping. That was Chris. And so we did, he was just snapped right into his vocal mic that he was using to sing on that song. So he, on that song, he doesn't really play any mandolin on it. So he sang vocals live in a booth. And then after the song was done, we just did a couple passes of him just doing snaps into the same, my original RCA 44. And so that was the mic that was used. Obviously, it would be super dark, so I boosted a lot of high end in that motherfucker and had to, you know, filter off some thumpy sub stuff and whatever. But ended up being a cool sound. It worked out once we pushed it in the right ways. Are we not going to talk about the lightsaber arsenal over in the bass area? Really, I want the videos of the lights off lightsaber battles. We all know they exist. You are absolutely right. They definitely exist. Unfortunately, none of those videos got captured on my phone, or yeah. But they definitely exist. There was some epic lightsaber stuff. That was Mike Elizondo brought those in, and they had way too much fun with those. Yeah, I'm glad that got noticed. Okay, what converters were used? At RCA, Dave Cobb's place was set up with the Lynx Aurora N, whatever their new ones are. So everything was captured with those. When I was then working back here, I'm using an Antelope Orion when I'm working here. And so yeah, so we did some additional vocal overdubs in this, well, yeah, working out of this room to finish up vocals. And then when we get into it, I did a whole bunch of reamping and stuff in the big, huge barn before it was even even remotely finished. Okay, so then, okay, did you record at 96K? Yes, we recorded at 96K. And then, since the 77DX is multi-pattern, can you share how you set it? Cardio, Omni, figure 8, high pass position. Okay, yeah, those mics are fine a lifetime. Boy, I love those things. They are a cherished item for me now. Okay, yeah, so when I got those mics, because I already had a 77D that had been re-ribboned a couple times by AEA. And I never really had a sense of what those patterns do on the back. There's a little sort of set screw that you can turn around. And so when I got the new 77s, I wanted to compare the new 77s to the one that I'd used for a long time, and also just educate myself, like, what do these frickin' patterns even do? And so I did frequency graphs of all of them and all the different patterns, as I do. So here they are. We can check them out. So first off, this is my longtime 77. It's not a DX, it's just a D, and it's been re-ribboned. And as you can see, this is a very warm sounding microphone. There's a lot of low end in there, and it's great for some things. I'm trying to see if we can see more detail on where this is at. Yeah, so this is, what is this? Yeah, down around 60 hertz, you know, there's a whole lot of 60, 70 hertz down there. And it rolls off pretty dramatically in the high end. So, and I always found it to be, you know, a dark sounding mic. You can certainly understand why looking at this. And a little, you know, by the time I EQ'd it and got it in place, it also just felt a little bit harsh, kind of unforgiving. And so this is in the B, bidirectional mode. And so now here is what I sort of arbitrarily labeled as number 1 of the 2 new ones that I talked about in the video. And so you can see way flatter. And it's really apparent when you plug this thing in. It's like, oh, wow, this is a very balanced, you know, natural, just, you know, ribbon mic sound. You get that sort of predictable roll off in the high end here. But man, it was just a whole other world once I started using these mics, and didn't, because I think often that my original one, when I put it up, it was so far away, like it was so bassy that it was like, this is just too far away. I can't tell if I'm ever going to get this into a place where it should be. And so it was just nice to be able to put these up and go, okay, I'm in the ballpark here. You know, I'll probably add a little presence or whatever, but much closer. Okay, so now check this out. So that's bidirectional. So look at the end position, which, as I understand, is non-directional or omni, and look what happens to that. I mean, that is just ridiculous. I mean, it is so bright and like in a really harsh way. I mean, this is like right hovering around 3K, man. That is an aggressive sound right there. Maybe there's a place that is suitable. I haven't found it yet. It just comes on and it's just so blistering. I just, you know, I don't know what to do with it. Okay, so then here is unidirectional. Much more balanced, but definitely a little more presence. And so this is something that I would actually potentially use. I ended up not doing it on the Nickel Creek stuff, but you know, if you wanted just a little bit more presence, or yeah, actually probably, yeah, kind of a lot more presence. this is a way to get it. Still a real aggressive sound there. Uh, and I find that ribbon mics in general, they just sound more natural to me when they're in their natural state of a bidirectional pattern. Okay, so then here's the second of the new to me 77s, and so we can sort of compare these together. They match up pretty well. Here's the N version, again, somewhat similar. This one seems a little more phasey and weird. There's some more comb filtering. I think that's why I've preferred the number 1. And then here is the just the bidirectional of both of them. And again, I think the number 1 mic has really been sort of the champion. That thing is really, really sweet sounding. But even, the two of these, I've actually used them as a pair on a piano and stuff, and they really match up quite nicely. Okay, so then here is the different low filter version. So this is on the number 2 mic, and I have to say, the place where it's rolling off is pretty high. Like all of these settings line up pretty good up in this 3 to 4K range, and then everything below that is getting damped down. And so when you look at it, it's more about this stuff, all of this coming down in relation to this, and so so that was the difference between those. So there you go. That's what I learned about them, and I'll be curious to try these again, these low pass things, because this actually seems pretty usable. This actually looks more similar to this, I think. Yeah, I wish I'd actually tried this. Now that I'm looking at it, this looks pretty flat, this L1 thing. But yeah, so on the Nickel Creek stuff, it's all bidirectional. Okay, yeah, placement of the 77 on the acoustic guitar. So I don't do as much of the off-axis thing with the guitar, because I find that the strings, the distance between the strings is enough where if I'm coming up from underneath, it can overemphasize the high strings, and conversely with the low strings if I'm coming up from above. And so I'll do a little bit, mostly for isolation, especially if, in this case, if Sean was playing and singing at the same time. So I'll bring the microphone up a little bit so I can tilt it down at the guitar in a place where the null of the pattern is pointed at his mouth, and it'll cancel out his voice. It's pretty magical when you're in a situation where they're going to be playing and singing at the same time. So that's one time where it'll come up, and I'll do that. It actually is worse if you go down low, because then the mic is just pointed directly at the mouth more, and then you just have like a delayed version of whatever mic is on his for his voice. So yeah, I'll do that, and I like the isolation between the instrument and the voice, and between the two, like if I'm going to go off axis to the guitar, I prefer going up above and just adding more weight to the low strings. The guitar just sounds kind of like bigger and has more support to the sound. So if I'm going to go one way or the other, I usually will go up. Okay, a few people asked about these barefoot chamber IRs. I'll figure something out with that. I got to coordinate with the person who actually created them and do it in a way that he's comfortable with. So I'll check with him. We'll figure it out. At some point, I'll make it available for everybody. So we'll see how that works. Okay, who had the idea for the trippy vibe of The Meadow? Okay, yeah. So for any of you that haven't listened through the record, there's a song called The Meadow, and a beautiful, dreamy, ethereal song. And so this really speaks to what I was talking about earlier. The song inherently evoked those feelings of this kind of dreamy quality, and because they were open to having me really push things beyond the boundaries of just what the instruments do by themselves in a room. On that one, it's like, okay, you want to be dreamy and ethereal? let's really go drink ethereal. So there's like all kinds of crazy, timed delays on the room mics with flangers and phasers and all kinds of stuff going on in there. Kind of a scene change when you get into the bridge. And I love that song. That is definitely one of my favorites of the bunch. It's such a cool song. It's just beautiful song. And so I think, as far as the idea, certainly the idea was inherent in the way the song was written and played. So they certainly brought all of that trippy vibe to the way it was composed and conceived. And then I did my best to try and just bring that out as much as I could in the way it was mixed and recorded. So yeah, and then if we do a breakdown, I'll be able to show all that stuff on that one. Okay, curious what you thought of the MCI tape machine. I love that tape machine. Early on, that was kind of my first like grown-up tape machine way back in the 80s, I believe, late 80s, because I was using a Fostex half-inch B16 for a long time, which is, kind of a prosumer version of a tape machine that was available back then. And so the most affordable one to get a real 2-inch tape machine was the MCI, and that thing was great. I loved it then. I really enjoyed using it again now, and I think it was a really, really good complement for this particular project. When we did pre-production at Mike Elizondo's place, he has some really cool tape machines there. He has, some really coveted vintage tape machines. So he has a Scully 8-track, which I love. I have a Scully 16-track. Love the sound of a Scully. And he has an MM1000, an Ampex MM1000. That is a crazy old machine, very vibey. 16-track in that case, 2-inch. And the Scully is a 1-inch. And so when we did pre-production, we did the Scully 8-track, and I just wanted to see like what does bluegrass sound like through a Scully tape machine, because it is a sound for sure. And we had a lot of fun with it. It was a little bit heavy-handed, I think. Ultimately, once we really got deep in it, I was like, this is a little too much for this. There's a lot of intricate stuff going on, and it's starting to get overwhelmed by just the sound of the recording and all of the harmonic distortion in the recording. The Scully is also notoriously noisy, which was going to be a huge problem at a certain point. Noise floor in that thing is not great. And so the MCI was amazing. Really great with noise floor. And I did some things to, actually, I'll wait, because I know there's another question coming where I can elaborate on this more. But I loved it. I did have to totally recalibrate the machine when I got there. The calibration seemed odd. That's all I'll say. It didn't make any sense to me. I don't know. I know Dave's been having great success with it, and his records sound wonderful. So it works for him, and it didn't make any sense for me. So I recalibrated the machine. I don't know if they put it back after I left, but I'm hoping that maybe they left it the same, and it's been doing good things for them, because I do more the IEC style thing. So 15 IPS IEC is just a beautiful sound. Okay, please, can you explain in more detail about your current love for the use of ribbon mics? So on this record, early on, we did the shootouts. I set aside a whole day and just warned the band, like, I want to take our time, make sure I have the best mic choice for each of you motherfuckers, and they were game for it. And so we spent a whole day just really listening and doing some comparison shopping. And so with Chris in the past, we've used my Elam 251. I had that there, and we tried that again. It does sound really, really nice on his mandolin. And yeah, I just tried kind of everything, and then a variety of different ribbon mics. For the mandolin, we tried a Coles. We tried one of the 77s early on. We tried a 160 on it. I've had really good luck with 160s on acoustic guitars and stuff. So we tried a bunch of different things, and ultimately the Coles really was so flattering to that instrument. And I went through the same process with all the other instruments. Tried a bunch of different mics, RCA ribbons, you know, even if for some reason they weren't giving me what I wanted, I'm happy to use condensers as long as they're doing the thing. And what my experience on this record was like, man, when there's a ribbon mic on there and you get things in balance, just some broad brush, sort of like bring up some presence, tuck in some of the boomy low end, what you end up with sounds so much more natural to me than a lot of condenser mics. And you know, I don't know if this has changed for me or what's going on, but anytime that I tried putting up a condenser mic, because there's times when they're like singing really, really soft and I put up a condenser mic, it's like, nope, that is just not as good. It just doesn't sound as cool to me as a ribbon mic. And so I really had to chase down figuring out how to get the gain that I needed to make ribbon mics work, because they just, somehow the way all the harmonics are balanced through those microphones, it just sounds right to me, and in a way that I've just never, it was just so definitive on this round in a way that's never happened before. So I'm not sure why that changed for me now. I mean, I've always loved ribbon mics, but it's always been sort of a combination, but I'm just really just at a place where it's like, these are just better sounding to me. They just sound more like the thing that I hear in the room. It translates in a way that just feels, it just feels more inviting, you know? So yeah. Any chance you could get Mike Elizondo on the channel? I would love to do that. His production is done with so much taste. Yeah, okay. So I agree. He is such a talented guy, and as I said in the video, it was a real treat to work with him. We had collaborated on some stuff over the years. I mixed, I think, a couple things for him, and we collaborated on a song at one point with one artist, and always a joy to work with him. He's just has that amazing, you know, bedside manner. You know, he's just the right balance of being just calm and agreeable, but always showing up with really just great ideas, you know, that are just super musical, and it's hard to just not go like, yeah, that's great, let's do that, you know. And so I would love to do that. I'll reach out to him and see if he's game for that. But yeah, he's incredible, and just blew me away even more on this project. I mean, I always knew he was a really good bass player, but like, there's being a good bass player, and then there's like playing Nickel Creek songs on an upright bass, which is like not even just complicated technically, but it's like physically a massive challenge, you know. And I was just blown away at his, you know, the reality of his chops on that instrument are no joke. That guy is a full-on virtuoso player. It was great. Okay, so then, Eric, do you have any means to accept monetary donations? I don't think. Thank you for asking. I was doing that for a while. I was putting up like a Venmo and PayPal thing where you can just send me a thank you. I guess I'll do that now. So here they are. I'll put them up. So if you're so inclined, you want to say thanks for doing this stuff, you can do it. Hopefully, quickly, easily, painlessly. You know, with the little QR things. And I appreciate it. You know, I'm having fun doing this, but at a certain point, you know, I have to be. I think as this progresses, I'm probably going to have to get somebody to help me, and I'll have to pay them. And so, you know, I may have to have some, just so I'm not actually losing money doing this. So, but I appreciate it. Thank you for asking. What was the secret sauce for the eerie, distant violin sound of Holding Pattern? Such a cool sound. Okay, that was unquestionably. I mentioned this in passing that, so after we did all the recording we could do in Nashville, and we were planning on trying to be done with everything, but we didn't quite make it. It was a really ambitious schedule, especially for a, whatever it ended up being, 17, 18 song album. Didn't know it was going to be that many songs when I first signed on for that thing. I was like, whoa, dude, this is a lot of work, you know? And so what we ended up doing was we got as much as we could get done in Nashville. Everybody went home, and I did a whole bunch of organizing of the session, and then set up here in Vermont. I have this huge cavernous space in the barn. At this time, it wasn't done. There was no insulation in the walls, and I just set up a portable rig in there and brought a bunch of my favorite amps and then regular monitors. I have an ATC monitor that I'll use to reamp things in the room, and reamped a bunch of stuff in the room. And so one of my favorite things was the violin going through, again, a magnetone, with a bunch of its spring reverb, and then only capturing the room of this huge, cavernous space. And so that's what you're hearing on that is the violin, the direct. I got the little direct pickup and put that through the amp, and it just created this beautiful sound in the room. And so I think that's what you're hearing. To me, still, there is no replacement for microphones in an actual real acoustic space. I don't know how to get plugins to do that. Other people seem to do great with it. I hear other people's stuff, sounds great, and I assume they're using plugins. Maybe they aren't, I don't know. But man, plugin reverbs just are really not getting there for me. And so on this Nickel Creek record, there is no plug-in reverbs. It's all, either reamped in a giant room or a chamber. Sometimes I extend the room mics, like with the Barefoot Chamber impulse response, but that's kind of as far as I went. Earlier on, I was trying to use reverbs, and they were just profoundly unsatisfying. So yeah, when we get into it, we'll be able to check all that stuff out. Okay, so this person noticed is saying, I noticed there was a red console. How did you try that at all? I did not use the red console on the Nickel Creek project. There was another project that I recorded there where I did use the red console, and it was really fucking cool. Because I was, trying to do this thing of having everything go through these RCA mic preamps, but there's a certain point where I just run out. There's only 6 there, and so I do all the essential items through that. But the red console was a cool complement to that sound. It was, equally vibey, tons of harmonic color in that thing. It had these crazy EQs in there, really aggressive sounding EQs. So yeah, that thing was cool. I was moving pretty quick, so I didn't get to know it that well, but there was a few things that went through it that were like, wow, that is cool and dirty sounding in all the right ways. Okay, New Nickel Creek sounds great. Okay, about panning. Also wanted. Okay, this is the thing about noise floor, so I want to talk about this a little bit. Also want to know how you got the noise floor so low with all the ribbon mic gain tubes, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I talked about this before, but the way the cloud lifter things didn't work with the RCA console. I had to use an Undertone Audio MPDI4 to preamp as a preamp. And so I would get a bunch of gain on the Undertone Audio, and then I would pad the output of that to turn down the noise floor of the Undertone Audio preamp. It seems kind of counterintuitive, but it really worked because I would be adding more gain than I was padding. So it was a net plus of gain, so I'd have more gain ultimately coming out the RCA preamp. So I would add maybe 45 dB of gain with the Undertone Audio preamp. I'd only pad it maybe 25 dB, and so I would be plus 20 dB hitting the RCA preamp. And when you pad the output and pad down all of that amplifier, that gain noise in the MPDI4, the Undertone Audio preamp, then it stays nice and quiet. So it worked really well. And then the other thing that I do and did on this record is some of these songs had super duper duper loud, where they're all just like jang, 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 playing super hard, and then go to these incredibly quiet bits. And it was almost impossible to make that work going through these preamps and a tape machine and all of that stuff. And so this is where the benefit of capturing the mic preamps, direct digital, into the computer, because I'd capture something that is really appropriate for the loudest they're going to play across a song. And so in the quiet sections, things would potentially be too quiet and constantly have a huge amount of noise, especially if it comes out of the tape machine. And so what I did is I would gain up those sections digitally before they hit the tape machine, and then gain them back down, after that. And it works really, really well because, there'd be sections where they're playing easily 12, 18 dB quieter than they are in the other sections. I would just turn it up all of that amount. So it's now metering around 0 on the quietest section. And then after I printed it, I would grab that section and just turn it down that exact same amount. And all the noise goes down with it. So it's a way to really extend the dynamic range when people are playing super loud, playing quiet with tape machines and stuff. Okay, moving on. This is... How did you get the instruments to sound so full and expansive, given that you use a single mic on each of the 3 main instruments? Mind space. Really looking for... Okay. So when you think about it, it really isn't just one microphone on each instrument, because they're all playing at the same time. And so there is mandolin getting into the violin mic, and the acoustic guitar mic, and the room mics, and the bass mic. So it's getting all over the place, and all those other microphones add amazing dimension to the sound. It just that's where all that depth comes from. And if you go through and just mic instruments with one mic and in isolated spaces, or just overdub everything, and you don't get the benefit of the sound of the mandolin getting into the fiddle, the guitar, the room mics, the bass, all of that stuff, it's not nearly as expansive. It doesn't have that same kind of dimension and depth. So that's a huge, huge part of it, and it comes with the benefit of having musicians that can all play at the same time, the way Nickel Creek can. They're obviously extraordinary at that. And so it allows me to really, basically every other mic is a room mic for the one instrument that's not not going there. And so the like the mandolin and the guitar are panned opposite each other, and so you get this beautiful room sound of the mandolin in the guitar mic, and consequently the same thing for the guitar going into the mandolin mic. And whenever I'm lucky enough to record with musicians that allow me to use that approach, the results are always incredible. And you can hear, there's a couple things in there, these shorter segue bits. Those ones were ones that it was all live. They did instruments, vocals, everything. And some of those, to me, have the most incredible depth and dimension, because you're adding vocal mics as well into the mix that are picking up everything in all kinds of different directions. So, yeah, I think that's probably the explanation. Okay, this relates to the last thing I just said. I'm curious, were all the final vocals cut live on the floor, or did you have to go back and recut any? The majority of the vocals were overdubbed. There was a certain point where we just all agreed that to get all of the performances where they want them, and also to have control over the sounds the way we all needed them, we had to separate out the vocals. There are places that were very challenging that way, and like I just mentioned, some of these shorter little segue bits, we did take on the task of doing voices, instruments at the same time. And you get into some interesting challenges there where, like, if I want to have Chris's voice in the middle and the mandolin all the way to one side, then his voice has this weird sort of like tilt to it. And it gets a little tricky. And so in those really atmospheric songs where we chose to do that, it worked great. But once you get into these songs where they're playing super loud and singing super loud, and like, it was too hard to manage, just the bleed between the instrument mic and the vocal mic. And again, like this was an exploration of a surreal approach sonically. And so I have way more options for pushing things in a surreal direction when I have more isolation, particularly between the vocals and the instruments. So there's only, I think, 2 or 3 exceptions where but all their vocals were recorded at the same time. There's a couple of songs where we opted to have them sing live. So like on Holding Pattern, Chris doesn't really play any mandolin on that. He overdubbed a mandola part on that. And so he sang his vocals live with all the band takes, and so we could comp from that stuff. And I think ultimately we did a few more takes if we didn't have what we wanted in the live passes. We did a little more passes when it was just him singing by himself. Could focus on some spots, but then everything else we overdubbed the vocals, and we ultimately settled on a thing. We experimented with having them all sing at the same time, or doing one at a time, and ultimately one at a time, really felt the most comfortable for everybody, because you could get the lead vocal down and then you have like what everybody is matching to. When everybody's singing at the same time and different people are flying off in different directions a little bit here and there, it gets very complicated very fast, figuring out like, okay, do you need to rush more, or do you need to lay back more, or whatever. Like there's just a lot going on with some very complicated parts. And so I think to get everything to a place that they were happy with, we all agreed that, overdubbing vocals was better. Okay, moving on. Okay, there's a few questions here. Will you be offering mastering services from the Vermont studio? Yeah, I will. I've done a little bit of that. I feel like I'm getting more confident about it. I'm feeling very confident with my Strauss monitors. I think they're so awesome. I'd love to prove to the world how great I can do with them. So, I'm definitely open to that. Okay, the ISO booth at Barefoot provides some incredible drum sounds. Guessing Impulse. Yes, so in that same collection where Kian got impulse responses of the chamber, he also got the big room, he got the drum booth, he got underneath the drumbrella, he got Studio B sound room. So a bunch of cool stuff in there. Wondering if you have any drum sampler instruments in the pipeline. I'm going to do that at some point. There was actually a period of time a while ago, maybe late 2000s or something like that. I was talking to Native Instruments about doing a drum sample instrument thingamajig, and it was just, I could just never find the right time to do it. But the whole purpose of this new place here is that I will have time to do all kinds of tweaky experimental stuff. That's really how I'm sort of structuring this new thing. So yeah, at some point I will do it. I'll try and figure out the best way to, make it available to people. A few years ago, I purchased some stems on Beatport of the Death from Above album. They sound incredible, and are slightly different from the album. Yes, they are different. Okay, so that. The album mix on that was definitely like, would be very difficult to do as broken out stems. Things are getting mashed into compressors and, in sort of a cascading way, and there was no way for me to do that with individual stems. And so what I ended up doing, and at this time, this was in the era when Barefoot was now being sort of rented out. Other people were in there recording stuff, and so I just set up in another bedroom in Topanga and did those Beatport mixes, and it was interesting. I sort of recreated the essence of the mix. I brought all of the outboard gear that I had used on those mixes and had it available, and implemented it as hardware inserts and recreated the mix in Pro Tools. And then for Beatport, there was a certain point where I couldn't get the benefit of having everything, collapse and sort of pump into one stereo compressor. There's just no way to do that. And so what I chose to do on that one, as I'm thinking back on it, is I did leave the compressor on. So I think in this case it was an Unfairchild on the whole mix. And so the drums, the instrument, everything would end up going through that Unfairchild, and it doesn't hit it the same as when everything goes through it. But if I just left it off, it was definitely a big part of the sound, and so it made more sense to have it on there. So the whole thing probably feels a little bit less compressed than the stereo mixes on the album, but you know, it might be cooler in that context anyways. It leaves a little room for people to do some of their own processing on there, you know. But yeah, that's how that was done. Okay, you should get a gimbal for your camera. Yes, I agree. I apologize for that. Winging my phone around. I didn't even really know what a gimbal was. I've only learned about that recently, filming that crazy, you know, Undertone Audio promo video, Bear and Scared thing. So I'll try and start doing that in the future. Okay, question. When designing the UTA Pyrisum mixer, what thought process made you choose a passive design over an active one? That's a good question. The main thing, without a doubt, for me is the flexibility. You know, I had an Undertone console for a long time. I used that thing for, you know, 10 years, and it sounds incredible, but it is one sound, you know, like all the summing musses have a particular sound to it. All the preamps have a particular sound to it. And if you're going to have a console in front of you, it makes sense to use it, you know. And so with the passive summing mixer, it just, and honestly, it's something that I grappled with the Undertone console. Like, it was great for doing like big aggressive rock records and stuff like that. But when I wanted to do something that was considerably more nostalgic sounding, like an old soul recording or something like that, I would have to do a lot of extra work because that console was just not designed to really do that thing, you know, whatever it is, like stuff that was recorded on old tube gear and old, you know, all of this crazy old stuff. And so still, to me, the easiest way to get there is just use the stuff they used, you know. And so with this passive summing mixer, it's so cool because I can just, like, if I wanted to sound like a Neve console, I use Neve preamps. If I want to sound like an API, I use APIs. If I want to sound like an old RCA tube console, I use the RCA tube preamps. And so it is so flexible in that way. And that was really why I wasn't going to commit to just one, you know, summing amp design in there, and limit it in that way. So there you go. Okay. Okay, yeah, another question about the IRs. And it looks like that's the last one. Some point, you know, they'll get out there. All right, so there you go. I think I'm caught up. Comments and questions, as always, thank you so much for all of these, you know, very thoughtful questions and comments. I really appreciate it. You know, I always learn stuff just either by the questions or things that people are sharing with me. So it's just great to have this conversation with everybody. And I'll see you the next time. All right, bye.